tutorial is going to look at how to write a personal response to text. When you are looking at an assignment, you often only will have one text to consider. If you are writing an exam, you will have three. You will have a piece of poetry, a piece of prose, and a visual. You are given three on an exam, not so that you will write on three, but so that you have a choice on which one to write. So whether you are completing an assignment on a personal response where you have one text, or an exam where you have three and we'll narrow that down to one text, we're going to take a look at how to complete a personal response to text. The first text we're going to look at is a brief summary of the fairy tale Cinderella. Cinderella lives a happy life with her mother and father until her mother dies. Her father remarries and brings a cruel stepmother and two stepsisters into her life. Things get even worse when her father also dies, and Cinderella is made a servant in her own house. Her stepfamily makes her do all the chores around the house. They wear expensive clothes and eat delicious food, giving her only rags to wear and leftovers to eat. The poor girl, who has no one to turn to, does all that she is ordered to do, while sobbing quietly. The only thing that keeps Cinderella alive is hope, through her dreams, that her Prince Charming will come along and free her from the constant torment. In the meantime, the king wants to find a bride for his son, the prince. He invites every maiden in the kingdom to a fancy ball so his son can choose a bride for himself. Cinderella's stepmother and the stepsisters are very excited at the invitation, but deny Cinderella permission to attend the ball. Cinderella again sobs quietly and continues as she is ordered. She knows she would never be allowed to go, and even if she was, she would not have anything appropriate to wear. Cinderella watches in despair as her stepsisters get ready and leave without her. But then, a fairy godmother appears, transforming Cinderella's ragged dress and slippers into a beautiful ball gown and glass slippers. The fairy warns Cinderella to be back by midnight, as the magical spell will be over. At the ball, free from all her burdens, Cinderella dances with the handsome prince, who instantly falls in love with her. When the clock strikes midnight, Cinderella runs home, keeping the fairy godmother's warning in mind. As she rushes out of the palace, she loses one of the glass slippers on the palace stairs. The prince, who is madly in love with Cinderella, sends his men with the slipper to find out who it belongs to. After a long search, they arrive at Cinderella's house. First, her evil stepsisters try it on, but it does not fit them. When Cinderella puts her foot into the glass slipper, it fits her so perfectly that the prince marries her immediately, and they live happily ever after. That is the prose text. The poem is Dreams by Langston Hughes. Hold fast to dreams, for if dreams die, life is a broken-winged bird that cannot fly. Hold fast to dreams, for when dreams go, life is a barren field, frozen with snow. And the visual for this assignment is this photo entitled Graduation, where you see a number of students in cap and gown who appear to be in the midst of their graduation ceremony from some institution, whether it be high school, university, college. It's a graduation ceremony of some sort. The question that you are being asked to deal with for these texts is, what idea does the author develop regarding the influence of an ideal on individual behavior? Support your ideas with reference to one of the texts presented and to your previous knowledge and/or experience. Okay, so the influence of an ideal on individual behavior. So you need to consider, of the three texts, you have Cinderella, Dreams, and Graduation. You have to decide which one of those you're going to write on. It tells you that in your writing you must use a prose form. Well, a prose form is anything that is not poetry. Here is a brief list. There's a short essay or rant, conversation, newspaper article, editorial, interior monologue, short story, personal observation, letter, eulogy, interview, rebuttal, screenplay, speech, anecdote, commentary. Notice it says etc. in the bottom corner. It's because this is not an exhaustive list. These are not the only prose forms from which you can choose, but they are some suggestions. Notice that diary entry is not on this list. Not to say that you can't write a diary entry, but students for some reason tend to want to default toward a diary entry. Aim to choose something other than that, unless beyond a shadow of a doubt the diary entry is the perfect choice. There are occasions where it may be, but just be aware there are a plethora of prose forms available to you to use. So you must use a prose form, and you are going to connect one of the texts provided to your own ideas and impressions. So in initial planning and on an exam, you will be asked these first two questions. What is the connection between the text and your response? And what idea do you intend to explore, and how does it address the topic? And you are told that you can respond using a personal, creative, or analytical perspective. So the way in which you respond, the format in which you respond, you are given a great deal of latitude. You're told to use a prose form, of which there are many, and then you are also told that you can respond using really whatever perspective you would like, personal, creative, analytical, some combination thereof. So it truly is wide open to you in what you can do. Really, you must write on one of the texts and on the topic. And as long as you're not writing a poem, everything else is very wide open for you in terms of choice. When you are looking at the prose form that you are going to use, what you want to do is choose one that will best serve your purpose and communicate to your audience. So if a newspaper editorial will do that best, use that one. If a conversation between two people would be better, then choose that one. Perhaps you want to write a speech. Maybe that would be your best choice. But you need to determine what it is that you want to say, and that will inform the format that you use. And once you have chosen the format, ask yourself, how am I going to organize this piece to achieve this particular format? Where should it start? What goes in the middle? How will it end? What should my writing look like? What are the most important organizational issues when I write in this particular format? Because, for example, if you are writing a short story, you know that it follows a certain trajectory where you basically have a little bit of antecedent action. There's an initial incident that sets up the rising action, and you build to a climax, followed by a short denouement, a little bit of falling action, and then your conclusion. Whereas if you were writing a news story, you're looking at the exact opposite structure, because you begin with the most important details right away. Basically, you're giving away the climax of the story in the first sentence, and then it narrows down to the least important details. So it's important that whatever format you choose, you are familiar with the conventions of that particular prose form, and that you are paying attention to those as you are writing. So let's take a look at the question and how we proceed. The question was, what idea does the author develop regarding the influence of an ideal on individual behavior? There's quite a bit to deal with in here, and the best place to begin is to define and refine. We're going to go to a dictionary and a thesaurus and define these keywords, influence, ideal, and behavior. And they're also then going to go to a thesaurus and find synonyms for them. You might think, well, I already know what those words mean, but going to a dictionary may give you some further ideas to think about that perhaps you hadn't considered. And when you look at synonyms of these words, again, it may give you something else to think about that hadn't first entered into your thinking. Now, the definitions and synonyms that are presented here, again, just like the prose formats, are not an exhaustive list. This is a sampling of what was found on dictionary.com and thesaurus.com. And as you know from your experiences with using those tools, there are many entries for any given word, whether you're looking at a definition or a synonym. So find the ones that seem to best suit this particular question. When you are writing an exam, you are allowed to use a dictionary and a thesaurus. They will be print copies of those. You can't use them in digital format on an exam, but because you are allowed them on an exam, this should be the first step that you do, and that you get used to taking the time to define and refine, and making sure that you really understand what it is that these terms mean, what is meant by influence, by ideal, by behavior. And once you have that solidly in your head, then you can proceed to write a thesis statement. So the question is, what idea does the author develop regarding the influence of an ideal on individual behavior? One way to respond to this question is, when people are presented with a set of difficult circumstances, their ideals may be what gives them the strength to not only endure, but persevere through the obstacles in their path. Now notice that this is one way in which to respond. It is not the only way. There is no correct answer. What you must do is write a thesis statement that responds to the question asked, taking into account all parts of the question asked. If you do that, then you have a correct answer, if that is what you're looking for. But there certainly is not one. If 50 people responded to this question, you would get 50 different responses. So don't think that you have to find the correct answer. You need to write a thesis statement that will respond to this question. Notice as well that it is general. When you're writing a thesis statement, keep in mind that it should be a general truth about life with a narrowed focus. General truth about life in the sense that this thesis statement could apply to me, it could apply to you, it could apply to any one of the texts presented. And that once you have your thesis statement, then you will narrow it even further by making the connection between this thesis and the text that you are going to explore. Notice as well that it actually answers the question. To write a thesis statement that says the author develops an idea regarding the influence of an ideal on individual behavior, notice that that does not answer the question. That's just like if you said to me, what time is it? And I respond to you by saying, you want to know what time it is. I haven't answered your question. So by simply turning the question into a statement, you have not answered the question. Or if you say that the author has said that the idea the author develops regarding the influence of an ideal on individual behavior is that it's important to have an ideal, doesn't really say anything either. Why is it important to have an ideal? So make sure that you actually say something that you can then argue about, that you can then explore. Give yourself something to work with. So if we're looking at Cinderella, the thesis statement, when people are presented with a set of difficult circumstances, their ideals may be what gives them the strength to not only endure, but persevere through the obstacles in their path. And then we narrow it down to Cinderella. Despite the deaths of her parents and the cruel treatment she received at the hands of her stepfamily, Cinderella's hope for a better life gave her the strength needed to survive her situation until that hope arrived in the form of two rather unlikely rescuers. Now remember, in the initial planning, it asks you what idea are you going to explore? So there you have it, the thesis statement. And what's the connection between your idea and the text? Well, there you have it for Cinderella. So if you take the time to write those two, you know that you will be focused on what it is that you need to do when you're writing a personal response. Now, depending on what it is that you're going to write, the prose format that you are going to choose, you may never explicitly state either of these statements, but through your writing, what you're saying will be implied. So say, for example, you are going to respond from a personal perspective, which is one of your options. Maybe then you are going to write a commentary on Cinderella waiting to be rescued, as opposed to taking action to change her situation. She sits back and waits for for this fairy godmother to appear, and then, even when that goes awry, she continues to wait for Prince Charming. Could she have done something different? So there is one possibility. Commentary with your thoughts on this whole fairy tale structure. A creative perspective might be to write the fairy godmother's internal monologue on Cinderella, looking at her suffering and thinking about what she can do to rescue Cinderella from this situation. So you would be writing the fairy godmother's internal monologue. And if you see that your strengths are in analytical writing, perhaps you would write then a brief essay exploring the statements that are listed above, this thesis statement and then the narrower one for Cinderella. Those are simply three options. Those absolutely are not the only possibilities. But you see that those are some possibilities in terms of format and in terms of the direction you could take when you're looking at the different perspectives. For dreams, same thesis statement. When people are presented with a set of difficult circumstances, their ideals may be what gives them the strength to not only endure, but persevere through the obstacles in their path. Having dreams on which to focus may provide individuals with a determination to not waver from their goals, no matter the setbacks that may be encountered in the pursuit of those goals. So a way to respond from a personal perspective, you could have a conversation with a friend on your experiences with the strength that your dreams have provided to you. Whatever it is that you are attempting to achieve, maybe it's to get through high school, maybe it's to reach a certain level in an athletic or creative pursuit that you have, maybe it's to get a promotion at work, whatever it is, and you're seeing that there are some obstacles in your path, how have your dreams helped you to not give up? So it could be a conversation that you write that you would be having with a friend. From a creative perspective, you could write a eulogy complete with specific anecdotes that illustrate the two stanzas in the poem for a person whose life was a reflection of the ideas that were expressed in the poem, talking about the importance of not letting dreams go and not letting dreams die. So perhaps this is somebody who did face a great deal of obstacles in their life, but never wavered despite setbacks they may have encountered. And again, if you are writing to an analytical strength, you could write a brief essay that explores the statements that are listed. With a poem of this nature, one where you have only 4 brief lines in 2 stanzas, it's not a huge amount to work with in terms of analysis, and particularly under exam conditions that may not be the best choice, but you would have to determine that. And if you were opting to write on the photo, again, the thesis statement, when people are presented with a set of difficult circumstances, their ideals may be what gives them the strength to not only endure, but persevere through the obstacles in their path. Earning a high school diploma may be the incentive a student needs to persist through the demands of heavy coursework, firm in the knowledge that a post-secondary education and satisfying career may be the rewards that await. So from a personal perspective, as your future self, you could write a discussion you would have with your future child, detailing how your dreams gave you the strength to stay focused on the life that awaited you after high school. From a creative perspective, you could adopt the persona of one of the students in the photo and write a stream of consciousness that would occur during the graduation ceremony that would illustrate the statements above. And again, you have the possibility to write a brief essay that would explore the 2 statements listed above. So for all of the examples that are here for each of the texts, notice that we looked at different prose forms, 7 in total, that were options and certainly not the only options. We looked at how a thesis statement was formulated and then connected to one of those texts. And so that was the idea that we were looking at exploring, as well as the connection between that text and the response. And you see the options that there are in terms of writing a personal, creative, or analytical perspective. So as you are writing personal responses, the initial planning is what you absolutely need to keep in mind. What idea are you going to explore? How is the idea that you are exploring connected to the text and your response? What format, prose format are you going to use? What perspective are you going to use? You have a huge amount of latitude and choices involved in this assignment. Really, what you have to keep in mind is you're using a prose form, you are responding to the question asked, and your response has to deal with one of the texts.